The flight was supposed to be ordinary. The passengers filed in one by one, rolling their suitcases through the narrow aisles, searching for their assigned seats. Sunlight poured through the windows as the airplane stood gleaming on the runway, waiting to lift into the sky. Yet, what unfolded that afternoon turned an everyday flight into a story that millions would never forget. At the heart of it was a young girl named Amara, dressed in a simple white dress, her braided hair glistening under the daylight. To the other passengers, she looked like just another little traveler. But what they didn't know was that Amara was the only daughter of a reclusive billionaire, a man whose wealth could move mountains, yet who raised his child to value dignity and kindness over money. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable journey, if you believe in kindness, in the power of respect, and in giving second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Emotional Top Stories so more people can hear these life-changing stories. Amara had been traveling with her godmother, Celine, who accompanied her while her father attended urgent business overseas. Celine guided the girl down the aisle, pointing her toward her seat by the window, a spot Amara loved because she could watch the clouds roll beneath her as though she were floating in a dream. But when they arrived at the row, a man in a crisp white shirt and polished shoes was already sitting there, his legs stretched across both seats, casually munching from a bag of chips as though he owned the cabin. His leather shoes rested arrogantly on the edge of the seat, clearly marked with Amara's number. Celine gently explained that the seat belonged to the little girl, but the man didn't flinch. He smirked, tightened his grip on the bag of chips, and leaned back as if the world around him were his servant. Amara, young yet unshakably graceful, stood silently, her wide eyes scanning the situation. Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their gazes to avoid confrontation, while others whispered among themselves. Nobody spoke up. Nobody dared. It wasn't just a stolen seat. It was the dismissal of a child's dignity. Amara could feel the sting, not because she was denied a chair, but because her worth was being trampled by someone who saw her as powerless. What the man didn't realize was that this little girl's father owned some of the very corporations that helped fund the airline itself. But Amara had been raised differently. She wasn't taught to throw her father's name or wealth as a weapon. Instead, she was taught to stand with quiet strength, to let her actions define her. The air in the cabin thickened as Celine called for a flight attendant. The attendant arrived, her face caught between duty and hesitation, asking the man to move. He chuckled, refusing outright, saying he had already made himself comfortable and wasn't about to give up his spot for a spoiled kid. His words cut sharply and the sound of them rippled through the rows. Amara lowered her head, her small hands clutching the hem of her dress. But inside, something stronger than sadness was building, an unshakable resilience. The murmurs grew louder as more passengers noticed what was happening. Some began recording on their phones, sensing the tension might explode. The flight attendant called for her supervisor, who arrived moments later. The man argued, raising his voice, claiming he had every right to sit wherever he pleased. He waved his hands dismissively at Amara, calling her just a child who didn't matter. The arrogance in his tone made the cabin boil with discomfort. But then something unexpected happened. Amara finally lifted her gaze. She looked directly at the man, not with anger, not with fear, but with a calmness that silenced even the whispers. Her voice was soft but steady as she said that her father had always told her, "Respect costs nothing, yet it can change everything." The passengers froze, struck by the maturity radiating from such a young soul. The man sneered at her words, but his smirk faltered ever so slightly. At that moment, the captain was informed of the altercation. Regulations required that no flight could take off amid unresolved conflict, especially when safety or passenger well-being was at stake. The engines quieted, the crew announced a delay, and the plane remained grounded. What began as one man's stubbornness had now disrupted an entire flight. People began voicing their frustrations openly, some shouting that the man should be removed. Finally, security officers were called onto the aircraft. The man protested furiously, refusing to move until he was physically escorted off the plane. His once confident swagger dissolved into humiliation as passengers erupted into applause not just for his removal, but for the bravery of the little girl who had stood there with unwavering dignity. Almara was finally seated by her window, where she leaned against the glass, watching the sunlight shimmer on the tarmac. Celine touched her shoulder gently, whispering that she was proud, but Almara simply nodded, her eyes distant yet serene. She wasn't proud of the man's downfall. She was sad that kindness had been rejected so easily. Even at her age, she understood something profound. True wealth is not measured in money, but in the respect you give others, and in that moment, her silent strength had taught everyone on that plane a lesson far more valuable than gold. As the plane finally prepared for takeoff, the passengers carried more than just their luggage with them. They carried the memory of a little girl who showed them what dignity looks like in its purest form. Many would go home and tell their families about the child in the white dress, the daughter of a man whose fortune meant nothing compared to the richness of her heart. If this story has touched you, if you believe in standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable, please support Emotional Top Story by liking this video, sharing it so others can be inspired, and subscribing so you never miss a story that reminds us of the power of humanity. And before we close, I want to ask you to leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were on that plane watching it all unfold? As the plane soared into the sky that day, Almara leaned her head against the window, the clouds stretching endlessly beneath her. To everyone else, she was a billionaire's daughter who had just endured public humiliation. But to those who truly saw her, she was something far greater, a living reminder that respect, once given, can elevate even the smallest voice into something that grounds the world itself.